White Rick 85. Driving down to pick up a full shoulder mount from a deer I harvested in 2013. This nice one right here was a beauty. It was one of my widest racks ever. Not quite the amount of points, but certainly the width of it was really nice, and I wanted to go ahead and get that mounted up. Just picking that up now after all this time, finally getting it today. The price, of course, for a full shoulder mount like that varies around the country from $375 all the way up $600, or depending on the taxidermist services, and really looking forward to that. But for those deer that you get that aren't quite mountable, as far as I'm concerned, and some guys like to mount every deer that they get, and some guys don't mount any. It comes down to preference and sometimes monetary wise. But I harvested this little one in 2014, and what I'm going to do with that is what I like to do with a deer that I don't get mounted, but I do want to, of course, show it off and hang it on the wall. I do what I call is the pickle mount. So I pickle the hide and leave the fur on the cap itself, and mount that onto a board. Now, I know some guys like the European mounts, the skulls. You boil the skull and mount the full skull itself. And I know you can buy the kind of the pre-made product that you put the antlers behind, and it has a nice little display for you. And some guys will boil the cap itself and go ahead and wrap that cap in some colored felt, black or red or brown, depending on what they prefer. But I prefer to leave the hide on, and that's what I've done for 30 years now. So hey, let's rewind back to the house again, and I'm going to show you how I did that with my 2014 deer, and show you all the way back to the first deer that I got in 1984 that I did this, that it's still in perfect shape after all this time. Okay, here we are back down in the basement. So let me show you how I did this. For one, the pickling part, I've already completed. Actually harvested this deer in November, and it's now mid-March. So I've already done the pickling step of it, which is good because you can take care of it. And then once you've done that step, basically there's some drying, and then you can get to it whenever either the weather breaks good, and that's kind of what I was waiting for a little bit, so I could go outside and do a couple of these steps, and basically your convenience whenever you can get to it. So here's the little 5-point that I got in the shotgun season, Delaware shotgun season. And the first steps that you do, have the white vinegar right here, and just some, and you want to try to use some spring water or some distilled water, so it doesn't leave a little bit of contaminants on your on the bone right here, or on the hide itself. This was $2.29 for a gallon. A gallon of spring water is about $1. The other ingredient is your salt, and great value, so we know where that came from, and you know it couldn't have costed hardly anything at all. So these are really the 3 ingredients that you need to start. And what I do is I take a jug, a gallon jug, cut it down, and basically enough so your cap will fit in it, and fill that up with about a 50-50 mixture of your vinegar and your water, and about a cup of salt. And go ahead and fill that in here and let it sit for about a week. You want to stir it every few days. You can replace the liquid if you want during the midweek, and because sometimes you'll see it starting to turn a little bit on the red side as some of that blood from the hide or the skull starts to come out a little bit. So you can change it if you want. It's not a necessity. You do want to stir it every couple days to keep that all mixed up and make sure that salt doesn't settle to the bottom and it's not getting to where it should. After about a week, you'll have your cap that has been soaked So the next step you want to do is rinse that properly. You want to rinse it really good with water. You can rinse the hide and rinse underneath on the skull area, and rinse that really well, because basically what you're doing is flushing all that vinegar smell out of there. If you don't do a real good job of that, you will have a little bit of vinegar smell with this. So you do that, and that really takes care of it. Your next step is get your salt back out again. And on the underside, you want to completely salt the underside of your cap. Really good. You want to get that really salted up, really coated with a nice layer of salt. And if you've emptied this, you can just kind of put it back into here. Let that sit in there and dry. And you really want to give it a good drying time. Really depends on how long how dry your house is, and it's really going to take how long it's going to take. But it's going to be at least a couple weeks before that's nice and dry, and you don't want to rush this part of it. Just let that salt do the job, and the air drying everything. That salt will pull some of that liquid out of the bone, and everything should be really good shape after a couple weeks. And basically at this point, you're done until you really feel like finishing it. And like I said, I let this sit through December, January, February, and here I am a little bit into March. Some because I had some things to do, and others I just really didn't get to it. So once you're here, you can just let it sit. Just let it sit here as long as you need, and you're set and ready to go whenever you want to go ahead and do the finishing process. And again, this hair is not going to come off. I'm going to show you a couple of my other ones in a few minutes, dated back from way back when, and you'll see you're in good shape. So once this is dried really good, the next thing you want to do is on the back, you want to get rid of all that salt. Maybe use a scrub brush, an old toothbrush or something. Get rid of all that salt that's on the back of this, and just basically so it's salt free. And you're just about set to go ahead and mount this. So when you're waiting for this to dry, you want to take a look at what you want to mount it on. Some of these blanks, these are just basically a couple pieces of pine. These are available AC Moore, a lot of different places. You can use one of these. I selected this rectangle one because it kind of fits along with the antlers themselves. If you have a smaller set, it's a spike, it might fit on this, or there's certainly some larger ones. There's that basswood that I have over there I've used in the past that looks good. It actually looks like it's a piece of wood, a piece of basswood that's basically spliced and still has the bark on it. They look real good. But what I did with this is just stained it up and put some polyurethane on it. That's really all you have to do. And again, depending on where you get these are super cheap. So this is all stained up and ready to go. The next piece isn't so pleasant, but it has to be done if you want it to look right on your when you're working on it. The back side of the antlers themselves either has to be cut, flush, or sanded down with a sander. And I have my sander right here. This is the one that I used. This is one of the reasons why I kind of waited till it was a little bit warmer, because you definitely want to do this outside with the wind blowing and it blowing the other way, because it doesn't really smell real good. It kind of smells like when you went to the dentist and you had one of those cavities that were a little bit too deep and you had to do a lot of drilling. So not real good, but what you want to do is make sure you get the back of this all smoothed out, so when it's going to sit nice and even and flush onto your board right here. And you really want to get in there. Now you can, if you have a bandsaw, you can cut that with a bandsaw, depending on the tools that you have around the house. In the past, I've used a hacksaw. This time I just ground it all down. It took me about 10 minutes or so to grind it down with this belt sander. So it's nice and flush, nice and even, and I can get a nice mount just right like that on here. I did put a coat of polyurethane
on the antlers themselves. You can do that. You can also stain your antlers if you want the antlers to be a little bit darker. And one thing that I'll point out is around the antler themselves, if it sits in the water, it's going to get a little bit darker. And I'll get some close-ups here. As you can see, there's a little bit of staining in here, and you will get that occasionally. I've had ones that over here that didn't get that. This one particularly did. If you do stain your antler a little bit, darken it up a little bit, that won't show at all. So that's something to consider depending on how that worked. And if you work with your container that you're soaking it in a little bit, and you kind of customize it so it's just sitting in there and covering the hide itself, but not touching the antlers that much, that works really good too. Now there is gonna be some touch. It's gonna have to overlap it a little bit. If that does happen and you don't like the way it looks, go ahead and just stain your antlers. Use a little bit of stain on it. Always start in the back and then kind of work in. It's going to soak in a little bit for a couple days, and then maybe put another coat on if you have to. But I didn't do anything with this one. I just put the polyurethane on it. So I am ready, just about to go ahead and mount this to the board. And there's a couple ways you can do that. One that I use, and if your antlers aren't real big and they don't weigh a lot, I use hot glue on the back of it. It kind of sounds a little corny, but it works really good. If you put a nice layer of hot glue right back here and then position it onto your board, it's stuck on there basically for good. And for some reason, if it did fall off, it's hot glue. You just warm it up a little bit, you peel it right off, and you go to the other way that you can do it. The other way is to kind of get it set on your board, and you just drill through the back with a couple screws and right into the bone of the antler, and you know it's not going to go anywhere whatsoever. And I've done that with a couple over there. I've done it both ways. I've had it that I've hot glued, and I've gone through and drilled through the back with a couple screws, and it basically goes right into the bone on the side right here, and it works perfectly. It really holds it in place, and you know you're not going to have any issues with it. And one thing, when you go to the or your deer processor, and you just ask for the cap because you don't want to do the mount, you see there might be a little bit of this skull that shows up depending on how the guy does it. If he cuts it with a knife, and then they're using the reciprocating saws these days and cutting these off. If you just happen to notice, tell them to cut down a little bit farther, and then with this reciprocating saw, when he goes through the skull, it would just be a little bit higher, so you just have a little bit of an overlap of some of this hide itself. And that way you won't get this right in here. When this hide shrinks a little bit, you won't get this bone that shows. Now you can do two things with this bone. You can get your grinder, your sander, and you can work at it until that's completely ground off and you're basically up to the line of where your hide hits. Or you can use some stain, and in this case I'm going to go over and I'm going to use some Old English on it and see how that works. If it doesn't look good, I'm going to take it outside, I'm going to grind it off. So let's go over there and put some stain onto it. Here we have just some Old English or some dark stain that you can use just basically for this piece right in the front that shows a little bit, and we're going to darken that up so it kind of fades away. So now it's basically that white bone on the bottom has disappeared. And if it doesn't turn out right and you have your grinder, just go ahead and grind that off. It's really as simple as that. I kind of just wanted to leave it like this, basically so I could show you the two ways to do it. I just took one of those very simple hangers and put that on there in the center. So that's how that'll attach to the wall. And this is just a little bit of the stain that I used on the front just to see how the color would be. So that's kind of what that is in the back. So you're basically ready to mount your antler onto the board. And let me come around with the camera. So at this point I'm ready to mount it to the board. You can mount it a little bit higher, if there's a couple things you want to put down here, and I'll show you a couple options for that. You want to put it more in the center, you can certainly do that. I'm just going to go just a tad higher than center, and I'll show you why in a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and use the hot glue on this. So I'm going to take these spots right here in the back. This is like right above the eye sockets, actually right there. I'm going to load this up with some glue and put that in there. Again, if you really want to, you can kind of mark on your board, drill some holes, and then screw right into this bone right here with a nice longer screw, and you're not going to have to worry about that ever coming off. But I'm going to go ahead and use the glue method because that's worked for me in the past. It's a little bit faster as long as you have your glue gun all warmed up. And I'm going to go ahead and flip her over and just hold it there. And it doesn't take long, especially being cold down here in the basement. It doesn't take long for that glue to set up. So by the time I'm finished with a couple more things, it'll be dried and ready to go. One of the things that I've done in the past, I've used these clock numbers to put as the year. And as you can see, I have a bunch of these numbers, a couple different sizes. I've used some wood numbers in the past, but I think this one, this little bit bigger one, and here it is right here. Yeah, I don't know what year's missing out of there, but the 2, the 0, the 1, and the 4 will work perfectly for me for 2014. Have some Scotch tape that basically I'm going to put right here, and I'm not going to put this down hard. I'm just basically using so I can use that to make sure that my letters are level. And then I'll be peeling that off when I'm done. And if you have a tape measure, you can check to see what the middle of your board is, and it's right about the 3-inch mark. So I can put just a little mark on that tape. I don't even know if you can see it, but that tape is coming off. So that'll just kind of tell me where the middle is. And I'll go with the 0 and the 1, and then put the 2 and the 4 on the end of it. So here's my 0 for 2014. And these are self-adhesive, so you don't have to worry about those sticking or using glue. So once you have that in place, of course you can just peel your tape off. Now that I have the year on there, I have the shot shell from the 20 gauge that I used to take this deer. I was able to have bolt action, so I was able to save it. If you have a rifle and you happen to save the casing, you can do the same thing. But I'm just going to go ahead and take the casing, and again, using that hot glue, put it right about here. You can put it, if you want to put it straight, you can put it straight. You want a little angle, you can put it at a little angle. That's certainly up to you. That's your taste. But I'll go ahead and take the back side of this. And glue that on there. So let's take down one of these other mounts that I have up there, or antlers that I have on the wall over here, and put this one up. Here's one from '88 with the basswood, and I did make that a little bit on the dark side, the stain. Here's a little spiky from '97. As you can see, the board is smaller, and I used some wood numbers on that one. And again, here's one from 94. And here we are. This is actually the first buck that I ever got. This little spiky, and as you can see in the bottom, 1984, and that hide is still on there 30 years later. It's not, I can pull on the hair, it's not coming off. It's in perfect shape just like it was 30 years ago. So you can see it'll stand the test of time when you do this. You know, here we have this year's from 2014. And one other thing on the antlers, depending on whether you want the antlers up or if you want it like the head is looking down a little bit, that really depends on the angle that you grind on the back of the skull when you're taking some of that excess off. So if you want this to be actually up a little bit higher, maybe this one over here where it's actually head would be up a little bit higher. Say like this one right here where it's the antlers are actually up in the air a little bit more. You can certainly do that. I purposely did this one a little bit as the bending down look, or looking a little bit more down, just to give it a little bit of variety around my little workshop here. So it's White Rook 85. Hope you got something out of this video. Again, as you can see, I've been using this method for 30 years, and it works. Works good, and really depends on how you want to display your trophy. Again, remember, a trophy doesn't have to be a giant 8-point. It can be that first spike that I got up there. To me, that was a trophy. It always will be a trophy because it was my first deer. So this has stood the test of time for me for 30 years for this recipe that I've been using. And I hope if this is something that you want to do in the future, you come back, take a look at this video. Simple steps: the vinegar, the water, the salt. Give it a week, take it out, coat it with salt on the back, on the bone. Let that dry for at least 2-3 weeks in your basement, if you have one, in your garage. And then come down and see how you want to mount that. And again, once you're to the point where you got that salt on there and it's drying, you don't come back to it for a year. You don't have to. It's set and ready, and just sitting there waiting for you. So this is White Rook 85 signing out off the Delmarva Peninsula. Thanks for watching, everybody.